You think you already know this story. A woman looks back. God gets angry. She turns into salt. A short Bible story, a simple lesson. Don't disobey God. Case closed. But if that's all this story was meant to teach, then why did Jesus resurrect it thousands of years later with just 3 chilling words? Remember Lot's wife. Not remember Sodom. Not remember judgment. Not remember the fire. He pointed directly at her, and he did it while warning about the last days. So tonight, we're not retelling a children's Bible story. We're exposing a forgotten sin, one so dangerous that millions of believers are committing it right now, without realizing it. Stay with me, because the real sin of Lot's wife is still claiming victims today. Why Jesus brought her back from the dead. Jesus never wasted words. Every reference he made had surgical precision. So when he said, "Remember Lot's wife," he wasn't being poetic. He wasn't being symbolic. He was issuing a warning signal. A warning not about disobedience, but about attachment, about a heart that had already been rescued, yet never truly left. And here's the terrifying part. Jesus placed her story right beside his warning about sudden judgment, meaning this sin doesn't announce itself slowly, it doesn't knock politely, it strikes mid-stride while you think you're already saved. God does not execute people for accidents. Let's clear something up immediately. God does not destroy people over small mistakes. Scripture consistently shows judgment is proportional. So ask yourself honestly, would a loving, just God annihilate a woman for a reflexive glance? Or is that what we were taught to believe because it was easier than facing the truth? Because if the punishment was that severe, then the sin had to be much deeper than a turned neck. The word "looked back" does not mean what you think. This is where the deception begins. The phrase "looked back" was never meant to imply a casual glance. It describes lingering, yearning, desiring, emotionally reaching backward. This was not curiosity, this was grief. Grief over a world she didn't want to lose. She wasn't checking if the fire had started. She was mourning what God was destroying, and that changes everything. The real moment she died. Lot's wife didn't die when she turned around. She died before she ever left the city. Her body obeyed, her feet walked forward, but her heart stayed behind. And God does not judge footsteps, he judges allegiance. The sin God never announces loudly. This sin is terrifying because it hides, it prays, it worships, it attends church, it says, "I want salvation," but whispers, "I still love what God condemned." This is the sin of divided loyalty, and Scripture is brutally clear. God does not share hearts. Why salt was the punishment? Salt preserves. Salt freezes decay. She became a monument to a heart that wanted to preserve a dead world. She didn't just stop moving, she became immobile, unable to go forward, unable to go back. That's the outcome of double-hearted faith. Lot's wife and modern Christians. Now let's make this uncomfortable. Lot's wife didn't die in Sodom. She died after being rescued. She died while walking with angels. She died while escaping judgment. That should terrify modern believers, because this sin doesn't target rebels. It targets the rescued. The most dangerous place to be spiritually. The most dangerous place spiritually is not open rebellion, it's half obedience. You left the addiction, but still miss the thrill. You stopped the relationship, but replay the memories. You left the lifestyle, but romanticize the identity. That is Lot's wife energy. Why Jesus warned the end-time church, Jesus referenced her while describing sudden destruction. Why? Because in the final days, believers will be physically out of Sodom, but emotionally addicted to it. He warned that attachment would override escape. The sin that paralyzed progress. Lot's wife didn't fall backward. She froze. That's what this sin does. You don't go back to your old life, you just stop moving forward. Prayer loses fire, purpose fades, obedience becomes exhausting, not because you sinned loudly, but because your heart never detached. Why God demands total separation? God doesn't demand separation because He's controlling. He demands it because attachment always pulls you back. You cannot run forward while dragging yesterday. The secret grief most believers never confess. Many Christians secretly grieve the life they gave up. They grieve old pleasures, old power, old identity. They don't want it back fully. They just want to feel it again. That's where Lot's wife died. Angels can lead you out, but they can't change your heart. The angels grabbed her hand. They pulled her body, but they could not force her desire. Deliverance without detachment is temporary. Why this sin is never preached? Because it convicts almost everyone. It doesn't attack behavior, it attacks affection, and that's harder to surrender. The most dangerous prayer you can pray, God save me, but don't take what I love. That prayer was answered with salt. Why remembering the past is not the same as longing for it. Memory isn't sin, longing is. Lot's wife wasn't remembering, she was desiring resurrection for what God buried. When God destroys, do not mourn if God burns something down. It's mercy. Mourning it is rebellion, the spiritual law she broke. You cannot love what God judges. You cannot cherish what God condemns. That fracture splits the soul. Why her story ends without a name. She lost identity before she lost breath. How this sin hides in nostalgia. I was happier back then. That sentence has destroyed more destinies than temptation. The backward glance that cost everything. She didn't turn to see destruction. She turned to say goodbye. And God does not permit farewell ceremonies to dead worlds. When deliverance feels like loss, freedom always feels like loss, until chains fall off. Why this message is urgent now? We live in a generation addicted to memory, reels, throwbacks, past identity worship. Lot's wife would thrive on social media. The warning inside the warning. Jesus didn't say, don't look back. He said, remember her, meaning study how people lose everything after escape. How to know if you're in danger. Ask yourself, what do I secretly miss? The difference between temptation and treasure. Temptation knocks, treasure pulls. Why God didn't give her a second chance, because divided hearts eventually choose. The sin that silences spiritual momentum. Nothing kills calling faster than sentimental sin. How to finally let go. You don't release the past emotionally. You declare it dead. Why deliverance fails for many? Because they want freedom without funeral. What salt still does today. Her life warns us, attachment preserves judgment. The invisible pillars in modern churches, frozen believers, saved but stuck. Why you must burn the bridges. God never rescues halfway. When obedience feels cruel, God's mercy often feels violent to nostalgia. The last look that cost her destiny, she hesitated once. That was enough. Why Jesus didn't say, remember Lot. Lot escaped confused. She escaped divided. How to perform a spiritual inventory. Name what you still love. The prayer that breaks the curse. God, take even what I secretly want to keep. Why this message makes people uncomfortable? Because it exposes affection, not action. The sin that looks like faith church attendance does not equal detachment. The most honest question you can ask, what would break my heart if God took it away? The exit without looking back. Faith is forward only. The final warning, what you look back at will eventually claim you. There is one final truth in the story of Lot's wife that most people never sit with long enough. She didn't go back to Sodom. Sodom came back to her. It reached her through memory, through affection, through longing. And that is always how destruction returns, not loudly, not suddenly, but through the heart. The backward glance was not the crime, it was the confession. It revealed what she still loved. And here is the warning Jesus wanted us to hear. The reason he resurrected her story thousands of years later with just 3 words: what you continue to look back at, what you secretly grieve losing, what you keep alive in your imagination, will eventually claim authority over you. You don't fall back into sin suddenly. You drift into it emotionally long before you ever move physically. The heart always goes first. Lot's wife didn't disobey because she was rebellious. She disobeyed because she was divided. Part of her trusted God's rescue, part of her still loved God's enemy, and that division froze her destiny in place. That's why this warning is so dangerous for modern Christians. Because today, Sodom doesn't look like fire and sulfur. It looks like old identities you still miss, comfort you don't want to surrender, pleasures you secretly wish were still acceptable versions of yourself that God already buried. And we tell ourselves, I'm not going back. I've changed. I've moved on. But the heart knows the truth. If you are still emotionally attached, you are still spiritually vulnerable. This is why Jesus didn't say, don't look back. He said, remember Lot's wife. Study her, examine her, learn how someone can be rescued by God and still lose everything. Because the greatest danger is not open rebellion, it's delayed detachment. And the longer the heart lingers, the more power the past regains. The fire of judgment didn't destroy her. Her refusal to let go did. A spiritual inventory you cannot ignore. So now we come to the moment this message demands. Not theology, not agreement, but honesty. Right now, pause everything else in your mind and ask yourself one question, slowly and truthfully. What am I still looking back at? Not physically, emotionally. What part of your past still pulls on your heart? What sin do you call nostalgia? What habit do you excuse as memories? What version of yourself do you quietly miss? Because whatever that thing is, it is competing with God for ownership of your heart. And God does not share hearts. This is your moment for a spiritual inventory, not to feel shame, not to feel fear, but to choose freedom fully. Because salvation is not just leaving Egypt, it's refusing to miss it. It's time to stop mourning what God destroyed to save you. It's time to stop romanticizing what nearly killed you. It's time to turn your heart, not just your behavior, completely forward. So here's what I want you to do right now. If this message exposed something in you, don't scroll, don't delay. Hit the like button, not for the algorithm, but as a personal marker that you heard this warning. Then in the comments, write it, even if it's uncomfortable. What is the one thing from your past that you still feel tempted to look back at? Naming it breaks its power. And if you want to continue uncovering the truths of Scripture that are often skipped, softened, or ignored, subscribe to this channel, turn on the bell, because the most dangerous sins are not the loud ones, they're the hidden ones we never confront. And as Jesus warned us long ago, remember Lot's wife. Not so you fear God, but so you never lose your future to a past that God already burned.